So, Alex, I have your permission to use your IQ from last week.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you. Kieran, I have your permission to use your IQ from last week.
Of course.
Good. Wonderful, thank you. No, it's not embarrassing. You will see why it's not embarrassing. You will see why it's not embarrassing. Where's Ellie?
Ellie.
Spriggs.
Right here.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I have your permission to have your IQ from last week.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember it?
127.3, yeah.
No, it was 124.
Was it 124?
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
Try and get myself a few points there, but
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You will see why. It's good that because I wrote it down because I thought, yes, that's exactly where I wanted to be.
cool.
Thank you. Just a quick note. Sorry, I don't mean to be intrusive, but accommodation is
Yeah.
sorted.
Yeah, at home.
You're staying.
Yeah, we
safe.
figured it. Yeah, we figured it out. Yeah. I'm good for the next 4 years. So
Sorry.
good for the next 4 years. So.
Perfect. 4 years.
Yeah, well, that's what we've agreed.
Good Lord. Wow. I wish I had this security.
Yeah, they need me around.
Good. Does that actually help you using a laptop instead of looking at the screen?
It does,
Yeah?
because it means I can see it from here rather than looking at it.
Thank you. That's quite important feedback because I know that for some people, it's better if they watch it. Although they are still there, but they use their own devices. Good. Thank you.
I missed your lecture, but I was watching it on your live stream. Is it possible to get the lab manual?
Of course it is possible. So the live stream is useful.
Yes, I was on the train.
Do you actually get good enough signal on the train? Really?
All of it, the whole hour. I heard everything you said. I saw the tables and everything.
Whoa! Thank you. Okay, looks like I haven't lost a lot of people. Maybe I've gained some, I don't know. And the suggestion has been made to do a crocodile. You know the crocodile that they do in the kindergarten, right? With the students, they get a rope and they all have to hold tight to a rope, and then we all cross the road together. But I thought, yeah, maybe not, not this time. Right, now we are back to BI 308, so please go to your devices and record your attendance. Yeah. And I can't remember exactly the deadline for quiz 2. I think it is on Sunday the 9th. Is that right? For quiz 2 in this module. I lose track about when is something to be submitted. So I need to find a different system. I know that one quiz for BI 308 is open at the moment, and please do it. It's easy marks. You can do it as often as you like, and only the top mark will count. But I will double check, and I will send you the usual Friday prayer email where you get all the information. Yeah, I hope you don't find that too intrusive, but I think that's a good way for me to communicate with you. And make sure that we are all basically singing from the same hymn sheet. Okay? So, BI 308. I want to continue where we started last week. And the main focus last week was the normal distribution. And the reason why I'm harping on about normal distribution is it is such an important concept that I really want you to get it. Because on the basis of the normal distribution, there are lots and lots of other distributions that we are dealing with. So, for example, I told you that with the normal distribution, there is this characteristic where I said that in the 2 sigma range, so here's our mean, here's the 2 sigma range, minus 2 sigma plus 2 sigma. And in this range here, that spans that, we have 95% of our observations in this range. Now, I lied. Not because I'm a horrible person, but it's just simply for convenience, because this 2 sigma actually is not 2.000 sigmas. It's a slightly different value, but usually people take it as 2. This value here, if you are precise, it is 1.96 sigmas. Have you seen this number before, 1.96? You're going like, yeah, I think I have seen it. Where have you seen it? Poisson distribution, exactly. When we looked at the Poisson distribution, where we counted frequencies, right? Now, these are 2 totally different things, Poisson and the normal distribution. And yet, this 1.96 turns up. Actually, turns out that the Poisson distribution turns into a normal distribution when you have really, really big numbers. We will find that other distributions, for example, a binomial distribution or chi-square distribution, will also have a relationship to the normal distribution. And the distribution that we will touch on today, the T-distribution is very closely linked, again, to the normal distribution. So the normal distribution is really at the center of everything, of life, universe, and everything. It's basically, I would say, 42, if you know what I mean, right? If you don't know what I mean, don't worry about it. It's basically the life to the answer to the question of life, universe, and everything. Read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, last week we did the IQs, and I want to build on that. So we had, I told you, IQs. The test in the UK actually has a population mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15. And we assume it is normally distributed. Interestingly, when people have done that, and I need to be very careful here because I know that people out there can hear what I'm saying, so I need to be really careful. I know that people have applied these IQ tests to other races. And they found that this one, IQ 115, pretty much holds true for the UK. Surprisingly, because one of the researchers was actually British. So apparently there are nations that are more intelligent. So for example, do we have anyone from Singapore? Apparently, according to the website, the Singaporeans have an IQ with a population mean of 108. And people from Equatorial Guinea have an IQ of 74. That's almost 2 standard deviation below the UK IQ. And you can, do we have anyone from Equatorial Guinea here in Africa? No? Central Africa? No? Whew. And you can immediately see how you can abuse these things. Yeah? You can say, oh, look at them, they are dumb. We really need to help them. Actually, let's send lots of sort of missionaries there. Well, they are all non-educated. Let's promote teaching programs. Let's help them, those poor, dumb little Equatorial Africans. And you can immediately see how this is yeah. So whenever you deal with statistics, be careful. Be very careful. My suspicion is that probably the numbers that have been tested were very, very small, and there was a huge bias. So, for example, the researchers sometimes just simply pick up 5 people who happen to walk past, do an IQ test, didn't properly explain what it's all about, gave them some money for it. They said, oh yeah, hey, auntie, come, you get some money, just tick some boxes here, yeah, and you get totally banana results. So IQ tests, always ask, where is it coming from? and terrible things have been done with that. But we are not doing terrible things. What we recorded last week, we had 3 people who I can remember with their IQ. We had Kieran, and he was very embarrassed because he said he had a pretend IQ. Of course, that's not your true IQ, of 90.5. We had Ellie, who I remember said had an IQ of 124. And we had Alex with an IQ of 72. And I showed you how we can calculate with the normdist and norminf function in Excel how many people are below. For example, what is the percentage of people who are below Kieran? We found it is 26% are below. That means 74% have the same or higher IQ than Kieran. And we calculated his Z-score, or sometimes people, instead of score, call it C-test, the test score. And we got that as minus 0.63. So that means he is 0.63 standard deviations below the average, the population mean. For Ellie, we found that 94.5% are below her IQ, or in other words, 5.5% are above, and her test score, T-test, was, what was it? I think it was 1.6. And I showed you that I can very easily calculate how many people are in the, let's say, top 10%. Or how many people are in the lower 5% or something like that. Yeah? Now, what I want to do, however, is I am interested in how people learn. What do you need to do in order to make learning, for example, stick? And is there actually something that links learning to IQ? I'm really interested in that. Do people with a high IQ learn better than people with a low IQ? Now for that, of course, I need to find people where I can measure that. So in a way, I want to find people who are, I need to be very careful again here with my wording, people who are special. Yeah? People who are not mainstream. People who, I think the correct technical term is neurodiverse. Is that the correct term? I hope so. Basically, people who are not like most other people. I want to find a group of people who are either very high in their IQ or very low in their IQ. And if I did an experiment with them and found that, for example, they get exactly the same test results, then I can say it's really unlikely that there's a correlation between IQ and learning. Yeah? So I want to find, for example, special people. let's say I want to work with the 10% who are different. What's my task? Let's think about it. We have our normal distribution here. It should be symmetrical, it's just my drawing abilities. And what I'm looking for is, I look for the really special ones. I'm saying I'm looking for 10% of people who are special. I'm not interested in the 90% who are sort of not special, who are, forgive the expression, boring, who are basically like everybody. So I'm not interested in these 90% here. What I am interested in is, oops, that was the wrong one. These tails here. Yeah? I want to find people who are either very intelligent or very or not very intelligent. Yeah? According to that. What is actually this area here in terms of percent? The black one is 90%. What is this area, the red one on the right? How big is that? 5. You are absolutely right. How big is that? It's also 5%, right? So what I'm looking for is now, I'm looking for the 5% of people who have an IQ of higher than what? Or instead of IQ, I could also do a Z-score. And I'm also looking for people who have an IQ of lower than, again, what? Or I could do a Z-score. Now, if you do the calculation with this norm dist function, I actually can't remember what you get, but you can use a different function, which is the norm S dist function. This norm S dist gives you a Z value, it gives you a Z score in Excel. And I want you to try that out next time you open Excel. What you find out that the Z score is actually 1.64. That's the Z score. Or negative 1.64. I do not expect you to memorize these scores. That's what we have Excel for. So I won't ask you that in an exam. What is the Z score for, 5% on the right or something like that. But if you do the calculation, the Z score is 1.64. Or in other words, you have to have a Z score higher than 1.64 to be special, or lower than negative 1.64. So let's go back to our fine young specimens that we tested. Kieran has a Z score of negative 0.63. Is Kieran special? Of course he's special, because he's Kieran. But in terms of this exercise, is Kieran special? No, because he is probably somewhere here, Kieran. So I don't want to work with him for this particular experiment, right? Okay, now surely Ellie, with an IQ of 124, she is special. She's really smart, isn't she? Is she special? What do you think? She's not special. Despite having an IQ of 124, she is not special. She just about doesn't make it into the special group. Alex, are you special? He says, full of confidence, not, yeah. As I said, you are all special. Let's calculate Alex's z-score. How did we do that? We said it's 72 minus 100 divided by the standard deviation, which was 15. And we get, for that, what do we get? Get your calculators out. What is 72 minus 100 divided by 15? Sorry? Minus 1 point. Are you lying? No, you're not. Minus 1.87. Right? Is Alex special with an IQ of 72? He sits somewhere here. This is exactly where I'm looking for people. So, Alex, congratulations. You made it onto my test program, right? Not that you get anything from it, but actually, what we have done here is the basis of almost every single hypothesis testing or statistical test. We have identified a sort of a range. We have identified two populations, two groups. One is the special, and the other population is the not special, the bland ones. Of course, they are exciting as human beings, but not for my purposes. So they are the rest. So I've got two populations. I have set a sort of a significance level. This is my 10%. This is the significance level. If you are in these 10%, you are significant for this particular experiment. If you are not in this group, I'm not interested. We know significance level or usually is abbreviated with alpha. Now, 10% is we. That's an interesting one. Oh, live stream is offline. That's not good. Bear with me, sorry. So, we are back. I hope it stays back. Oh, and we can even see comments if people make comments. I can't see them because my eyesight is so lousy, but that doesn't matter. So, we have set a significance level. And that's always what you do before you do some statistics. What is the group that you are interested in? That is the significance level. We have done a critical value. We have calculated a critical value. That is this one here. That's our critical value. 1.64, that's for 90%. 1.96, that would be if we want 5% of the students to be special. Think about it. How do I know that? Well, I want 95% in here. What is this tail here in percentage? Alex, you did that earlier. 2.5% each. Absolutely right. And we actually know what the set score here is, the critical set, because I just told you, minus 1.96 and positive 1.96. That's the set score for that. Yeah. So these are the critical scores, and I can look them up in a table, or I can look them up in Excel. No problem. And the other thing that we have done is we calculated a test score. So in the case of Alex, we calculated minus 1.87. Yeah? And this is exactly the procedure that we are going to do time and time again when we want to compare things with each other. First, we set a significance level. Then we determine a critical value. And then we calculate a test score. And in the fourth step, we compare critical with the test score. And if the test score is outside, is larger or much smaller than the critical value, we say actually they are outside the interesting range, outside our significance area. Yeah? Like we just did. But of course we can go a little bit further and we can say, what is the probability actually that we get this test score? So we can say, find probability that we get this test score. This or an even more extreme test score. So we can just simply do the probability. So I can ask, what is the probability that I get somebody with a z-score of negative 1.87? Let's see if I can do that in Excel. Of course, it doesn't work at the moment, but you get the point. Why doesn't it work when you need things? What you would do is you would put in norm.s.inf into Excel. Your test score, and it gives you a probability. Sorry?
Can you read what you wrote on 5? The 5th point. I can't read much.
The 5th point.
Yeah.
Find the probability that we get this particular test score or an even more extreme one. Yeah? So we can calculate what is the probability to get this particular score. Does that make sense? And we can say, if this score is outside the sort of the cutoff points, we are interested in it. Are you happy with that? Yeah? Now, the normal distribution is great because everything links to the normal distribution. But it has one major drawback. This drawback is, actually, it's two major drawbacks. One problem is that I told you we can use the normal distribution only if we have large numbers at our hand. Yeah? At least 30 observations. Usually when you do an IQ test, it's not a big problem because you test 100,000 people or something like that, so that's good. The other thing is, so normal distribution requires large number and that's the big problem, you need to know the population standard deviation. The first one, the large numbers, that's sort of, the second one, that's a crucial bit. Because, let's face it, you need the standard deviation, the population standard deviation, to calculate your critical value and to calculate your test value. No population standard deviation, none of these values available. Now, very often we don't have the population standard deviation. For example, apparently the length of a man's left hand middle finger positively correlates with, and I suggested that last night at the dinner table and was immediately stopped by my wife, and she said, "Stop, do not talk any further." Right? And all I wanted to say is positively correlates with his shoe size. Right? Now, I would love to do that, but I don't know the population standard deviation of a man's left hand middle finger. By the way, that's the right hand, right? I don't know. So what do we do if we don't know it? There is a way around. Thank God for that, because otherwise I wouldn't harp on about it. What we can do is, if we don't have the population standard deviation, we can try to estimate it. Try to estimate it. And what we can do is, actually, we can replace the population standard deviation with a sample standard deviation. With the sample standard deviation S. And you know the difference between S and the sigma, it's the n minus 1. Yeah? So we can try to make an estimate for the population standard deviation by just simply taking a sample of male left-hand middle fingers, I mean the length, and try to figure out what is the sample standard deviation. So we can actually do our measurements, but instead of the population standard deviation, we need the sample standard deviation, which we can easily take from a group of people. But now we are going away, actually, from our classic normal distribution in two ways. It's no longer a normal distribution because we haven't got population sigma. We have to use a different distribution. And we are now using a sample distribution. Remember, last week I told you about the sample distribution. And we said the sample distribution for the normal distribution is sigma divided by square root of the sample size. Now, we don't have sigma, so we would replace everything just simply with an S. So that's our sample standard deviation for the sampling distribution. So it would look like this would be our sampling distribution, which is S over square root n. Have you ever seen S over square root n? Yes, you have. What is it called? S over square root n. Second lecture that we did together. Remember, sampling error of the mean. At that time, you didn't know why you were calculating it. You were just sort of calculating it because I told you. But this is where the sampling error of the mean comes from. It's just simply the sample standard deviation divided by square root n, by the square root of the sample size. So that's one thing, that's the sampling distribution. But we got normal distribution. We have to use a slightly different distribution. And it turned out that luckily there is something for that. This distribution looks pretty much like a normal distribution. Although for each sampling size, there is a different one of these distributions. So if you have a very small sample, your distribution looks like that. It looks still similar to a normal distribution, but what you notice is that these tails here at both ends are quite fat. And when you look at it, you will find that for this particular case, when we have, for example, a sample size of 3, you find that these critical values here for 95%, I actually do exactly the same thing that I've done for the normal distribution, 95% in here. So I've got my 2.5% and 2.5%. The critical values in this case is, and again, if that doesn't blow your mind, you have no emotion or no memory. The critical value for that here is 4.30. And you have seen this value again before, haven't you? That's a critical t value. And this distribution is no longer a normal distribution, it is called a t distribution. For every single sample size, there exists a particular t distribution. And the fantastic thing is, when your sample size goes up, the shape of your t distribution changes. And the bigger the sample size, bigger n, the more similar this t distribution gets to the normal distribution. So some people say, if your sample size is over 30, then you actually can realistically use just simply a normal distribution. Don't do it. It doesn't cost you anything more. Just go for the right t distribution. If we are working with a t distribution, the process is still exactly the same that I laid out in these 5 steps above. First, we set our significance level. Then we calculate the critical value. We then determine a test score. In this case, it's not a Z score. It is called imaginatively a t-score. We compare the critical with the test. And we then say we find the probability. What is the probability that we find this particular test score or an even more extreme one? And then say, does that belong to the special group or does it belong not to the special group? So that is where this T-distribution comes in. And of course, the T-distribution is the basis of what is called t-tests. And you have all done t-tests in your GCSEs, right? Maths, something like that. Was it GCSE or just shortly afterwards? Shortly afterwards. Do you know who invented the t-test? No? Was actually a guy who was employed by the Guinness Brewery called, I think, Gossett or something like that. He was employed as a quality assurance manager because the Guinness Brewery wanted each batch of Guinness that they produce of a very similar standard in terms of quality. They didn't want to send out rubbish products like their competitors, where one day you had really strong and the other day you had, you know, lion piss. They wanted somebody who can compare reliably different samples with each other. So this guy invented this test. He knew about the normal distribution, and he said, well, all we need to do is calculate that for this slightly different t-distribution. So he did. He came up with some what is called t-tests, and a t-test is basically nothing else but a different way of calculating the test score. And I'll show you that next week, how you can do that for different scenarios. And then the brewery people said, fantastic, that allows us to establish exactly what we need to do. Make sure that all our goods have the same standard. Now, he wanted to publish his results, but the brewery said, no, that would be, you know, revealing our secret, so you can't publish it, because then people know that you are working for our company and they would know our secret. So he had to publish it, unfortunately, under a synonym, and he called himself Student T. And that is why it's called the Student T-test ever since. I'll show you next week how we can play around with the Student T-test for different scenarios. Thank you very much.